Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is RupkathaBhattacharjeeofficial and you're watching my channel which is named after me because I lack creativity. Dark academia, which initially originated as an internet aesthetic in the early 2010s, has amassed immense popularity among Gen Z and even millennials, not only as an aesthetic but also as a literary subgenre. In this video, I will primarily be focusing on the merits and demerits of dark academia as a genre, if we can even call it that. And if you like this video, make sure to watch till the end, like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell icon because later this week I'll be uploading another video which talks about 5 books that are considered to be immensely popular and a part of the dark academia genre. So, what is dark academia as a literary genre? To quote writer Natalia Villa, classical literature, brilliant minds, knowledge, learning, academic devotion, mystery, and a romantic atmosphere permeate the still rising genre of dark academia. Most novels that call themselves dark academia are set at an educational institute with some form of historical relevancy or in similar educational spheres. One of the key characteristics of dark academia is that our protagonist is an outsider by some account or the other to the aforementioned institution. Another key feature is a close knit friend group which inevitably spirals as someone dies or, more accurately, is murdered. The books tend to garner inspiration from prolific Gothic writers such as Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley, and Shelley M. Jackson. They also derive inspiration from Graeco-Roman tragedies and Shakespearean stories. Many readers and writers argue that dark academia as a genre has no concrete meaning, it's rather a thematic choice in a genuine literary subdivision. But everyone agrees that there are 3 things that make a book dark academia: murder, tragedy, and homoerotism. So, why exactly is this so popular that there are millions of TikTok videos and Instagram reels tagged as dark academia? So, this aesthetic has existed in internet circles for quite some time. Its sudden upsurge in popularity was noted in 2020 when the pandemic was at its height and countries had initiated lockdown. Some muse that dark academia grew as an antithesis to the upsurge of anti intellectualism, featuring banning of books, anti-vaxxers, flat earthers, and religious supremacists with a mild dose of social Darwinism, though the extensive elitism, class-based discrimination, and isolation that permeates peers obsessed with dark academia seems as a natural argument to the previous one. And others argue that dark academia exists because of the growing college fees, in academic inflation and lack of jobs for students who pursue liberal arts. It serves not as a mere aesthetic but as a medium of escapism for students who would have liked nothing but to spend the entirety of their lives pursuing knowledge. Though the questions regarding its popularity remain unanswered, there is no denying the fact that dark academia is one of the most popular aesthetic that is influencing publishers, writers, and readers alike. I mean, you can open any of your social media apps where you interact with book related content, and you will find millions of book influencers who have this curated aesthetic where they publish memes, images, reels where they pertain to this certain degree of dark academia with dark filters, tweed jackets, and merry bottom shoes. Now, dark academia has many lovers, but it is still not above criticism, and many so called critiques of this aesthetic call out some certain points. The first one, most prevalent, being Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism may be defined as a mindset or ideology that intrinsically prioritizes European or Western lives and values over their Eastern counterparts. With regards to dark academia, Dr. Sarah Burton writes, outside of thin white Europeanness, there is little scope to legitimately imagine yourself into this aesthetic. This Eurocentrism is extremely prevalent when one tries to garner book recommendations, which other people might call dark academia. The ones written before the 20th century are usually written by straight white European males, and the ones written during or after the 20th century, though maybe written by women, they still center around European or American males. Moreover, the very ethos of dark academia, which promotes academics and religiously focuses on Western forms of education, and most of the times glosses over the inherent racism that these institutions have built upon. This is also what I like to call the cult of whiteness present in this community, which emphasizes on the fact that dark academia should or must always involve the study of Latin, Greco-Roman classics, and history of Europe. These people don't want to acknowledge that other countries exist out of their romanticized version of Europe and essentially perpetuate the idea that other languages or literature, in that case, or even other people who look different from them, are not really worth studying about, reading about, or learning about. The cultural decimation of the literary merits of authors outside of Europe still persists not only in academic spheres but also in spheres that are inspired or are a direct result of academia. I mean, you can ask one of these so called academia enthusiasts and future scholars who've apparently read and learned by heart every book that has ever impacted modern literature about Rabindranath Tagore, and they'll give you a blank look. But you can ask almost every Indian who pledges the same thing about Charles Dickens, or Oscar Wilde even, they'll be able to give you a basic answer. This is not because Dickens's literary merits are more than that of Tagore. It is because the West loves to control the narrative that every good thing comes from them. And the second point that many critics bring up is elitism. Many people believe that dark academia helps perpetuates an us versus them narrative where the us are the more often white liberal arts students drowning in generational wealth enough to keep studying their entire lives without a worry to work or earn money, while the them is working class people who do not have the time or resources or even ability to read the original versions of Dante's Inferno or learn a dead language because they're bored. Because let's be real here, most of the things that this literary genre or even aesthetic tells you to do require three things to be able to do them: time, resources, and lots of money. And this cycle of generational wealth also breeds a cycle of elitism where romanticized universities like Yale, Oxford, Cambridge are filled with children of alumni who have donated dozens of buildings. As a literary genre, dark academia books also have this thin layer of elitism present in them, as our main character, who I previously mentioned, is an outsider, meaning a part of the working class or middle class, tries to fit in with the elite, extremely intelligent and extremely rich, emphasis on the rich, students, and suddenly has a revelation that these people are so much better than the people who he was or she was before. The third point being romanticism of poor habits such as smoking, drinking, and bad sleep schedules. Now, this is a point that doesn't really need much elaboration. Dark academia enthusiasts tend to believe that work cannot be done without smoking a pack a day or working on 12 ounces on coffee. That is exactly a line of thinking that I'd expect from someone who has never worked a day in their life because coffee is expensive. The fourth being misogyny. Apart from racism, there is also violent misogyny present in dark academia circles and in the genre alike, where women often serve as a plot device or as an accessory to the male lead or the main side characters. These female main characters or even side characters are more often than not manic pixie dream girls over whom our narrator loses his sleep and fantasizes about day and night. This sort of misogyny not only takes away the voices and experiences of women in academia, but also isolates them further from the narrative and its conversation around academics. Even though many popular dark academia books currently are written by women, with the exception of a few, most of them center around men. And usually, as more often is the case, they do not feature a female main character that exists out of this fetishized lens that the narrator sees them through. And don't get me wrong, I do like unreliable narrators, but I would also sometimes prefer if female characters were actually given a weightage, a voice in their own stories. Finally, let's talk about what dark academia means to me as a person, as a literary genre, and I would also love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. I believe that the commodification of aesthetics has diluted the book industry, where nowadays authors get book deals offer vibes and buzzwords such as cottagecore, enemies to lovers, dark academia, etc. etc. And this essentially leads to watered down pieces of literature that have nothing except for their aesthetic value that would aid the author in gaining more money when the novel eventually gets adapted. Because nowadays that's what books are being made for, to sell, to get adapted, and in the end, make people money. Like, what does a dark academia book even mean? Is it pretty pictures of classroom? Is it tweed jackets and Mary Jane shoes, as most people will never be able to afford? I think that dark academia books cannot exist without the critique of academia. If they do not necessarily center how academic institutions will forever be exclusive to people who can afford them and who can fit into this well curated sense of elitism that permeates this academic sphere, then as a book about academics, it is completely worthless, and people just can call it an aesthetic book instead of even calling it a dark academic books. Like, gothic as a word still exists. You can always call it a gothic book if you really feel that your aesthetic plays an important enough role in the story for readers to know. Essentially speaking, dark academia must not center around the praising of academia, but as a medium for underrepresented voices in academic circles to air their grievances with this pre existing system that purposefully leaves out marginalized communities. And it is also to be recognized that it is far easier for authors to market their pseudo anti racist novels as dark academia and get book deals to publish them without any major problem. But if an author of color writes anything near critical about the romanticism of academics, then suddenly it's too violent, it won't sell well, and it's racist to white people. I think some people might catch which book and which review I am talking about. For instance, why don't we take Sarah Underwood, the author of The Lies We Sing to the Sea, which is a retelling of the Odyssey and marketed as dark academia. In reality, Sarah Underwood has never read the Odyssey. I mean, how does she wish to retell the Odyssey in a meaningful manner, in a way that does justice to its themes, to the entire ethos of the novel, without ever having read it? This is one of the major pitfalls of dark academia, where it puts emphasis on the aesthetic of learning rather than learning itself. Overall, with critical thinking and more inclusivity, I believe that dark academia as a literary genre does have its merits, especially when authors use their own original ideas instead of trying to make an attempt at recreating the secret history and failing miserably at doing so. What I want to see more in dark academia books is that they are not set in the USA or the UK, because let's be real, countries exist out of those two, and maybe it might be difficult for Americans to know that, but benefit of the doubt is a thing. I'll take anything set in the continents of Africa and Asia, especially because academics is taken very seriously in these countries, and there are many problems in the academic circles that I would love to see discussed through the medium of storytelling. I hope you enjoyed this short video discussing dark academia. I wish to make it longer by including my discussion of 5 popular books in this video itself, but my examinations are going on, and I might be a bit of a hypocrite if I talk about how romanticism of learning fails if I don't learn myself. So I got to study, I got to do all those things that normal people have to do, unfortunately, and which is the major reason why I'll be making another video discussing 5 popular books. I'll give you a hint, it will include The Secret History. If you enjoyed this video, as I previously mentioned in the beginning, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and leave a comment down below so we can hold a discussion about whatever you want to actually. Thank you for watching, be safe and goodbye.